Yesterday, I went to Council Grove. I knew there was a hermit's cave there. I'd taken my mother up there months ago, and I wanted to go back and record that because I read the history plaque, and it so fascinated me. I didn't know anything about this history, so I wanted to go back and do a video on that. So I did that yesterday, and you can see it on YouTube. But I didn't do a very good job with it. There's technical reasons, and I didn't know the story real well. But I investigated this morning a little bit. I pulled up a whole bunch of information, and it's really fascinating. I pulled up from Wikipedia just to get a general idea of what's going on here. And I'll just call him the Hermit. I won't even pronounce his name. You know, he was born in 1801. He was a lay monk of Italian origin, and he traveled to South and North America. He even went down to Cuba. It says he was born into a noble family in 1801 in Piedmont, Italy. After his mother died in 1819, he made a pilgrimage to Rome and then to France and Spain. He tried to become a monk, but was unable to accept the secluded life of the monastery. It doesn't say anything about falling in love with a woman in the Wikipedia here. So I'm not sure where they got that. I'll do some looking here. I've got another article from the Smithsonian magazine. It says he decided to become an evangelist in America and arrived in Caracas, Venezuela in 1838. He then traveled to Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and finally Brazil. He visited cities, Rio de Janeiro, and a list of a bunch of others here I've never heard of. In each place, he obtained authorization from the bishop and president of the province to preach the gospel before leaving for the interior to conduct his missionary work. He dressed in the habit of a Capuchin friar. He wore sandals and carried religious objects such as a Bible, medals of Our Lady, and a staff. So he knew the gospel well, good understanding of theology, was fluent in French and Latin, and he gave apocalyptic sermons, which he condemned luxury and avarice, warned of the day of judgment and the torments of hell, and spoke of the possibilities of salvation. Sacred ways where the faithful could make penitential processions to reduce their debt to God. Almost doesn't sound like the gospel, does it? It said he made rosaries and wooden crucifixes, which he sold for cash or bartered in order to support his mission. He made medicines from herbs, roots, leaves, and water from special sources. He gained a reputation as a saint who could perform miracles and drew large crowds. He organized processions, built chapels, blessed cattle, and baptized children. He cared for the sick, and his herbal teas became famous. In 1844, going to Rio de Janeiro, he became famous as a healer and counselor, continued his practice. Thousands of people came to him at Cerro Capestri in Santa Maria, Rio Grande do Sul, drawn by the word of the miraculous powers of the waters. And then it goes on to say the authorities of Rio Grande analyzed the water and found it was potable, but no different than any other water. He gave blessings to local people. Later career, he went to Paraguay, then Argentina, arrived in Buenos Aires, crossed the Andes to Chile, where he lived from 1854 to 1856. Is Bolivia in 1857, Peru 58, Mexico 59, Cuba in 1860, and Canada in 1861. It says, because he drew large crowds from time to time, the activities of this foreign religious leader often roused the suspicion of the authorities. You know, in a lot of ways, some of this stuff kind of paralleled Jesus's time as recorded in the Bible. You know, there's similar parallels there. And in here it says, reached the United States in 1861, then walked for almost 620 miles to New Mexico. I think that sign said 550 to Las Vegas, New Mexico. Then a mountain was named for him, Hermit's Peak, near Las Vegas, New Mexico. In 1867, he moved to a cave near the town of Las Cruces. Although the residents warned him that the Indians were dangerous, he lived there for 2 years, sometimes coming to the village to preach, treat the sick, and how do you catechize children? Catechize, like taking a class in that? I'm not sure exactly what they mean by that. It says, according to a plaque in the cave east of Las Cruces, New Mexico, where he spent his final 2 years, he told the people nearby that he'd light a fire every Friday night to let them know he was still alive. In April 1869, the villagers noted the absence of his fire, went up to his cave to investigate, and discovered that he had been killed. His murderer was never found. He died April 17, 1869, at the age of 69. He inspired others in Brazil the following decades. Some widely distributed photographs with a legend of him were actually pictures of a later monk. It says the Monge State Park was created in Lapa in 1960. And an important feature in the monk's cave, which is a place of religious pilgrimage for thousands of faithful people. It also includes a source of water that is considered to be miraculous. You know, I said he made little crucifixes and things like that. I don't know if any of them claim to be his. I'm sure there's some out there. But then we go on to the Smithsonian had an article here in December 1st, 2019. I just downloaded it here. It's like 23 pages long, a lot of it pictures. And it talks about his time in New Mexico, basically. And it says about 50 miles east of Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, Hermit's Peak rises some 10,000 feet among the pinyon juniper woodland of the Pecos wilderness. 3 years in the 1860s, he lived high up on the mountain, foraging for food, getting water from a spring. It says during his self-imposed solitude, he managed to attract a following during an era of religious fervor and experimentation in America. At the end of the 19th century, a local organization created in his honor, this is in Spanish, Sociedad del Maritano, or the Society of the Hermit. It counted 62 members. Their main practice was a long trek to the peak to pray and erect crosses. And this story follows the family that's still doing that up there. It says it's almost faded to the vanishing point. But there's one family. It says, I go to Mass on Sundays and take my kids, but I feel closer to God praying in that cave up there on that Mount Hermit. Remembering that my uncle used to be right here and my grandpa used to be right here, said Joseph Albeta, a 36-year-old resident of Las Vegas, New Mexico. It says there are a handful of other society members still in the area, but this past September, the Abetas were the only ones who made the trek to Hermit Peak. And this photographer accompanied the family for this unique ritual. And that's what this article is about. We've got a map here of there's Las Vegas, New Mexico, and kind of the route that goes up to Hermit's Peak. Oh, it says here, in 1861, Agustina, that's his name, headed to Mexico, where he again attracted a large following and it was sent to an insane asylum. Officials deported him to Havana after 5 months, citing the Mexican Constitution, which allows a government to expel any foreigner whose remaining he may deem inexpedient. Whatever that would mean for sure. Then he took from Cuba, he took a steamship to New York, and then walked 370 miles to Montreal, where he got a chilly reception. It says a cold climate and New France seemed to have congealed the heart of the inhabitants, the hermit wrote in his journal. So apparently there's a journal. My ragged clothes and mean appearance did not appeal to the Canadians. His lack of French also made it... his lack of French. I thought it said he knew French. Let me look back here. Was fluent in French and Latin. It says in this Wikipedia. Okay, but then he says his lack of fluent French. It says his lack of French also made it hard for him to explain to the, I say it's a French word here, I call it Quebecians or whatever, why he looked and lived the way he did. They distrusted me and ran away from me. It was the saddest period of my life. Well, I guess you could say maybe at one time he did know some French, but it's been many years since he probably studied that by the time he got up to Canada there. And it says after weighing the idea of going back to Italy, Agostini decided to explore the American West. When he joined a wagon train in Council Grove, Kansas in August 1863, the Kansas City Times reported that the old monk refused to ride in the wagons and wouldn't sleep in a tent. Instead, he walked alongside the wagons and at night wrapped himself up in a coarse blanket to sleep under the stars. Then he arrived in New Mexico. It says that New Mexico is a newly annexed U.S. territory. He settled into his cave and practiced his daily devotions. Each Sunday he walked to Las Vegas, New Mexico for Mass. The Las Vegas Daily Optic reported that people for miles about were so impressed with the religious character of the newcomer that they commenced making pilgrimages in large numbers to his lonely dwelling. Visitors returned with stories about how the hermit had cured their ailments or made a spring appear by striking the earth with his staff. And it says the hermit was killed in 1869 in another part of New Mexico by unknown attackers and found with his crucifix in his hand, wearing a cilice and ascetic's spiked iron belt that had been around his waist so long his skin had grown over it. Oh, that's some weird stuff there. The hermit's austere life and death are much in the thoughts of Joseph's father, talking about this family who makes that pilgrimage, about Victor, and he makes his annual trek. The climb has been harder for him since he was hit by a car in 2004. He now has several plates and pins in the lower half of his body, but he still is making that trek. He says he's fortunate enough to be able to do it. It says Agostini is remembered in many places, and his life story is encrusted with myth and false fact, as Thomas unveils the veritable events of the monk's life, a man of fascinating originality and prodigious endurance, infused with an indomitable spirit of adventure, emerges. And it's got me curious, and I might put something in the comments about where some of his artifacts may be found. See if they're in New Mexico somewhere. That would be really interesting to know where some of his stuff is. But that's kind of the rest of the story, and it just makes it all the more fascinating, really, that he spent supposedly a little time in Council Grove living in that little cave there. You know, is it fact or just a myth? We'll probably never know for sure.